From the official Marvel Snap Discord to boy, they really need to buff discard. Marvel Snap players are passionate about a lot of things, but one thing they are more passionate about than anything else is yelling on the internet. This is Marvel Snap Hot Takes. Today, we have hot takes from the official Marvel Snap Discord, and honestly, they might be the best hot takes I've ever heard. Random card generation effects are inherently bad game design. I get card games are supposed to have some form of randomness, but that's what card draws and locations are for. Card draws are good randomness because it makes every game feel different, and it makes it so you can't pull off the exact same combo every game. And locations are good randomness because at least you can retreat for one cube if the location that shows up is unfavorable to you. The reason why random card generations effects are bad randomness is because instead of rewarding good plays and smart decision making, it rewards blind luck that cannot realistically be played around due to asymmetrical information. This game already has plenty of necessary randomness, so random card generation effects are unnecessary randomness that makes the game a worse experience. It's important to understand the perspective you're coming from here, because to me, what you are expressing is the position of a higher skilled player who does not want to, and I'm paraphrasing here, lose to BS things they had no way of playing around. But if there is not some ability for you, a better player, to lose to BS things that you do not have the ability to play around, you as the player who are better will win a whole lot more. And it is fine for you to say that your desire as a consumer is to play a game that rewards you for being the better player more. My counterpoint to that would be that those games already exist, and that what we can learn from games like Versus System, which actually used the same IP as this game, but was famously a game that in practice rewarded the better player so much that it became prohibitive for anyone to want to play it for fear of just getting farmed by the guy better than you. There just wasn't enough of that asymmetrical variance in the game. You described the variance as good variance, right? The parts you described that were good are the things you can play around. And of course, as a good player, you will think the good variance is the things you can play around because that doesn't make you lose. And you need to. You, as a player, may not want to lose. The game needs you to lose. The game needs the better player to lose a certain amount of the time. When people talk about Magik the Gathering, right, I think that's sort of a great example of a game that gets this basic principle correct. The better player needs to lose to factors outside of their control some of the time, and if they don't, the game simply will not be able to be a rewarding experience for the worse player. There are two people involved in any game of Marvel Snap, and there should be a bit of fuzz as to the actual direct results. Let's say you are twice as good as the person you're playing against. Should you actually win twice as much? I think the answer is genuinely no. And so when I see this kind of thing, I don't think that's bad game design. I think you are correctly assessing what they have done to increase the replayability of the game. Because over a short period of time, sure, maybe the draws are going to be enough RNG. But you can mitigate that with a lot of stuff in Marvel Snap. There's a lot of ways to mitigate that, and I think part of the reason why you point at that is good RNG is because you are good at mitigating it. Why you point at the locations as good RNG is because you are good at mitigating it. To me, the very fact that you, a good player, are saying this is indicative that it is good game design and that it does need to be in there. Before I get to this one, I just really want to say, one of the big benefits of this system that we did with the official Marvel Snap Discord was this is a platform that allows for much more nuanced conversations. That said, I don't know how well it's going to play on YouTube. I loved reading this. I thought it was awesome, but it is also a massive wall of text, so we'll see how this does. The tech nerfs were a good thing because a lot of original tech had very little nuance. In Snap, there is an unusually large emphasis on board breakers because of how board breakers interact with a hard turn limit. In a traditional TCG, breaking someone's board is the start of a back and forth where you have to build up a game plan to win. But because of the hard turn limit, it's easy to deploy your board breakers exactly when the game is going to end, and then that's it. You've invalidated everything they've spent 6 turns building. And a lot of OG Snap board breakers were all in winning the board, Killmonger, or a full lane, Shang, Shadow King, Enchantress. This led to a lot of the play around not being in your gameplay, but rather in your deck building, moving your cards, bouncing to drop parity, playing 9 power cards that couldn't be Shanged or Shadow Kinged. All of that is true. And that leads to a very frustrating environment, where if your deck couldn't afford these mitigation strategies, there were a bunch of non-games where you would lose when your opponent played a tech card that broke your board on 6. By weakening existing tech and building new tech cards that have more nuances, like Cosmic Ghost Rider, Fin Fang Foom, or Deafening Chord, it gives your opponent a way in the match to play around that tech. For example, with Lin Li, whether you move the sword to Lin Li or the sword, or Lin Li to the sword, can depend on if you expect a CGR or a Fin Fang Foom. Put the sword in front to protect Fin Fang Foom to absorb the boosted power, but put Lin Li in front to avoid Cosmic Ghost Rider turning off the sword. This is maybe the single best take I have ever gotten in an entire... In the years I've been doing this, I don't think I've gotten a better take. I have no idea how it will play on YouTube because it's probably just going to be like a scrolling wall of text next to me by the time I figure out how to edit this. This is unbelievably astute. This is an incredible, relevant thing. And I'm going to give a couple examples from a couple of different card games. The one that came up to mind is Board Breakers is particularly like a Yu-Gi-Oh terminology. I thought of the card Nibiru, which when your opponent special summons 5 times in a turn, you can just play it. It eats all the things they've made, and it gain like you like make a token with all their power or something otherwise that is just like completely invalidating, completely ridiculous, typical Yu-Gi-Oh kind of thing to do, where it's just like all you can do to avoid this is not meet the conditions that allow your opponents to activate it. That is a good comp to a Shang-Chi. I think when you think about like how people actually played around that card, it was very much just like bunch of 9s. Not gonna get Shang-Chi today. I gotta dodge Shang-Chi and Enchantress, so all my stuff is things that scale to 9 power, and I never play anything else on that Angela lane. Like, that is astute. Another example would be, like, to use a board breaker in a Magic the Gathering context, like Day of Judgment, a board wipe card. The idea with that card is you invest into the Day of Judgment. Your opponent could have it. You kind of hold some things back. You can play around it. But the point they're making is that in Marvel Snap, there's no benefit to holding those things back to play around it because the game just ends. So final turn, Day of Judgment, GG, right? That is extremely astute. This is an extremely astute observation, and it is an extreme, like, it is sort of redefined how I think about this stuff. Board breakers versus more nuanced tech cards. It is a clear thing that once you point it out, you're like, oh yeah, that does make sense. They are doing that. And it's not to say they aren't necessarily making like the more boring kind of tech cards, right? Super Adaptoid exists. They did what they did to Ghost, right? Like, they're still doing some very boring board breaker type stuff, but I do think that this person is onto something here. Like, it's not a coincidence that the most dominant tech cards recently have been Cosmic Ghost Rider, who is very widely applicable, but still play aroundable in meaningful ways. And Negasonic, again, you look at like a wide applicability, but it is the kind of thing that you can play around. That does seem like a better situation for the game to be in than having everything defined by the board breakers. Dan Hip on the award track. There is absolutely nothing worse than getting a garbage parentheses Dan Hip variant on the reward track and knowing that it took a slot of actual progression currency. They should remove all the titles and variants off the reward track and just have progression currencies. Getting a Dan Hip is a slap in the face. Setting aside the incredibly incorrect hatred of Dan Hip, the person is getting at something real, which is there's a lot of things that are not progression currency on the reward track. And the reason for that is they need to have a lot of things that are not progression currency on the reward track, because if everything on the reward track was progression currency, you would be getting more free stuff. And they need to maintain a balance of what is and is not applicable, what you can and cannot earn, and what you do and do not want. You are a very specific type of person. You do not like Dan Hip. I consider you deeply incorrect about this, but I do think you are getting at a real thing, which is, why are there these boosters on the reward track? Why are there these variants on the reward track? Why are they there? And the answer is they are there because some people prefer them over progression currency. I do, typically. Like, if I get a variant, I'm a lot happier because I've got a billion things of progression currency anyway, right? Like, who cares, right? I obviously am not a normal person, but there are people like me, right? And you, of course, I feel like you could be like, check your privilege, KM, and I would simply say, check your privilege, hating Dan Hip. But I do think that different things are going to have different value to different people. And if you are a purely progression-minded gamer, I can understand not liking getting this stuff. But it is important to note that you are not the only person who is interacting with this system. From an economic sense, I would imagine they would probably financially benefit if they took all the rewards off. Like, if they were just like, every variant is gone, we're going to put on like 50 gold instead. I would imagine that comes out significantly positive for them, but maybe I'm way off base and the community is composed way more of like hardcore people who are willing to grind. Kind of interested to know what you guys think about that one. Ego needs to be removed. He has ruined a lot of games for me and a lot of other people, not gonna lie. Yeah, I mean, I feel this, right? Because, like, people call it a cope stay, but really what it is an ego stay. Like, you think that you're gonna win anyway, even though you know you're gonna lose. Your ego is tricky. Oh, you mean the location. No, I think ego's pretty much fine. Like, I think that largely the whole snap-on ego thing, I don't particularly like it. I'm not a big fan of, like, unwritten community rules a lot of the time. It's why I typically don't like when, say, they do a Golden Gauntlet, like Snowball Showdown or whatever, and have a bunch of, like, deck building restrictions on it. I would just vastly prefer not doing that pretty much all of the time. I think that largely the location ego being as rare as it is makes it feel like a cool thing that is happening and a lot less like a bad thing that is happening to you. I also think there's a little more skill involved in ego than people give it credit for. Like, you can make a real judgment as to whether or not your deck or their deck is better equipped to handle an ego, right? Like, there are going to be certain decks where interactions are pretty high on the interaction's pretty high on the premium list. Like, you got there is a high premium on your interaction. You need to be doing stuff in specific order. And then there are going to be decks that are actually like, ego can probably cook with this, like a Doom 2099 deck, right? Like, that's functionally what ego is skill testing. Part of why I don't like the snap-on ego thing is because it takes that away. Like, you have a location that is testing a very specific skill that nothing else tests, which is judge whose deck can get auto-played more reasonably. And instead of actually engaging with that, the one piece of control you have, the snap system in that game, we're like, just no, don't engage with that either. I don't like it. Magik is a training wheels card. If your deck can't function or get its combo off without a turn 7, it's weak and should get reworked. Snap is a 6-turn game, not 7. So, first things first, going from turn 6 to turn 7 is an extremely powerful ability, but I don't think it has a bearing on the decks Magik goes in. I think largely it's better to look at it the other way. What is Magik contributing to this metagame? What she's contributing is a bunch of decks that are interesting, dynamic, break the rules of Snap in a fun but not overpowered way. And the reason it's fun but not overpowered is because Magik herself is a giant button that says, rob me for 8 cubes. I think she's actually gotten to a point where I really appreciate Magik's design. That is a really fun way to do an incredibly powerful ability that allows a bunch of weird decks to function that you can just easily farm and keeps those decks from being metagame terrors. It's an inbuilt strength and weakness of those decks. It's basically impossible for a Magik deck over the period of, let's say, a month or two to maintain status as the best deck in the game because it will get farmed for 8 whenever you get good enough. Whenever you get to a density of Magik decks in the metagame where it's really profitable to play like Scarlet Witch and Legion in your decks, people do that and you will instantly fall over and cry yourself to sleep. Magik is awesome. Magik is one of the coolest cards in the game and one of, incredibly, the best designs. The only knock on Magik is 7 turns does take a little longer, and I don't love it, but I do think that, like, if you're going to do something this cool, and you're going to allow it to be the kind of glue to weird combo decks that Magik is, having it just have this enormous inbuilt weakness, like it's the exhaust port on the Death Star. I think that is unbelievably cool. I think it is a slam dunk design. Great. There are too many remakes/releases of already existing characters. There needs to be new, different characters and not keep releasing characters we already have in the game. I understand new/alternate versions of characters like Ghost Rider, Iron Fist, and etc., but there was no reason for Ensabanur, who's just Apocalypse. Same goes for Shang, Master of the Ten Rings. It's literally just Shang-Chi. New, different characters, please. I think that this is a reasonable take, but like at the same time, there are definitely there are characters I would like to play because I like them. And they're not very good, and so I can't. And I would imagine that that constituency does exist for a certain amount of people, right? Like, let's say you're a big fan of Emma Frost, right? The White Queen. You are not going to be able to play your fave. You're a big fan of Cyclops. You're not going to be able to play your fave. That's a little awkward, right? Like, it does kind of matter that, this is a game about the big heroes in Marvel, and a bunch of them got put into Series 1 because they wanted it to be really appealing when it came out. And now you sort of reap the whirlwind of that. Like, a lot of people's favorite characters are really bad. I think that largely, and this is going to be a controversial suggestion, I think that it's a much bigger failure when they make a second copy of a card, and that second copy also sucks. I think that's the one that's, unforgivable to me. Weapon X is a good example where it's like Wolverine is the guy. He is the guy. That's the man. He is one of the three pillars of Marvel, probably right behind Spider-Man in terms of being the guy. You make a second Wolverine and it's worse than the first one. That I feel like is an absolute failure. To me, I know it's hard for me to say that because again, it's a pretty competitive-oriented perspective, right? Like, oh, I need this card to be competitively viable or it's a failure. I don't want to say it that dramatically, but I do think that, specifically the second copy of a card you make, I feel like a lot of the reason you're making it is so it can be good for the people who are fans of that character. And I do feel like something like a Weapon X, big whiff on that part, right? I think largely I am in favor of them doing these, generally, because I like a lot of the characters and I don't like a lot of the glup shittos who are just kind of running around. I don't know who some of these people are. There are characters that I wish they'd put in the game. I think, a couple of them come to mind where I understand why they haven't. For example, I understand why they wouldn't do, say, the Mandarin, even though I really liked I actually, one of the few comics I legitimately, or maybe my dad owned it, was an Iron Man versus the Mandarin one. The Mandarin's a guy I actually genuinely like, but when you look at the Mandarin, you could kind of understand why that might be a bad idea to try to adapt. I think that there are generally gonna be a lot more people who are excited for a new take on a cool character than there are gonna be people like me who know who the Mandarin is. You know what I mean? I think largely Doom 2099, probably a cooler card than if it was named, I don't know, generic robot bad guy that AIM made or whatever, right? I think probably on balance, I'd prefer that card to be Doom 2099. My hot take is that Marvel Snap is one of the best games made, and the developing team do a great job at balancing and managing the game. Yeah, I think it is stunning to me that I still haven't found a game that hits the same spot that Marvel Snap hits in the years it's been out. If it were me, I'd be doing, if I were an unethical, iOS app developer, I'd be out here ripping off Marvel Snap wholesale. I think the game system is so good and so well put together and so incredibly conducive to being a mobile game in ways that are really, really amazing. And I feel push the competitive card game genre forward in a way that is very digital first, in a way that I think you could probably sell to investors. And then, the economy is the economy, right? So what I would do is I think the easiest way, if you're looking at Marvel Snap and you're what did this game get right? What did this game get wrong? they got right basically everything they did to card games. Like everything they did as far as like, what are we doing to modify a card game? I think they got that right. The 6 turns thing, the snap mechanic, the way in which cards work, how simple they are, the straightforwardness of them. I think basically all of that stuff turned out correctly, and then basically everything they tried to do to revolutionize the economy of card games did not turn out correct. So I feel like one of the things that really not bothers me, but like I wonder why it hasn't happened, is nobody's been like, what's up? It's DC Marvel Snap, and our economy doesn't suck. And I don't know why. I just genuinely don't know why that is. It's something that I've thought about for years. It's like, why isn't somebody doing that? And I think, unfortunately, I worry that the answer is, might not actually be that easy to do a better economy. Like, what exactly are you going to do? It might not actually be that easy. I really do wonder. Like, it's definitely a thing that I think about a lot. As far as the actual game, though, yeah, I think it's pretty phenomenally done. The decisions that Brode and the early game developers made that, again, not all of them get borne out. Like, not all of them ended up making a ton of sense, but most of the ones that didn't end up making a ton of sense were in economy design. And obviously, economy design factors in if you're going to be like, we're going to put Cyclops in Series 1, right? Cyclops is in your starter deck. Hulk is in your starter deck, right? If you're going to do that, that's because the economy design is factoring into that decision. And so it's hard for me to blame them on that. But like, gameplay, you take away the IP, take away all this stuff. 10 out of 10. Genuinely. It is actually that good. Thank you so much to the mods on the Marvel Snap Discord for helping to arrange this. These were just a few of the takes. I have enough for maybe 2 more videos that we might end up doing. I cannot stress enough how surprised I was at how good these takes were. Like, genuinely, some of these takes, that Board Breakers one, genuinely, I am thinking about Marvel Snap differently now. Like, that is just a good piece of terminology to differentiate tech cards from tech cards. You're gonna hear it in my videos. Great. I think that a lot of this was down to how we set up these takes, which is to say you could up and down vote them, but you could also vote hot and cold on them. But I also think a lot of that is just if you give people room to explain their takes, they'll actually do it. So I think it's pretty likely that I do a part 2 to this because there were just genuinely so many good ones. I was really shockingly impressed by how high quality the submissions were. And I just want to thank everyone who did it and the mods for helping to set it up because I vastly exceeded my expectations. I cannot stress this enough. Really, really well done. Thank you so much, everyone who submitted a well thought out take. I truly appreciate it. And if you didn't submit a well thought out take, I still thank you, honestly, for participating. I truly, truly appreciate it. As always, I've been KMBest. You have been phenomenal, and I will see you in the next one.